Well, this is a fantastically unique car. It is the only one in the world. Of course, it lives here at the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust, the Sportbrake XJ40. But you'll notice that there's another one here. And we'll tell you the story of how and why. With David Marks, of course, who joins me again to talk us through, David, the differences between this and a standard XJ40. I mean, the bodywork is obvious, isn't it? But what have Jaguar actually done here to create this sporting brake?
Well, basically, they've, in essence, removed the boot and put a tailgate on. But to do that, they've had to do so much more. So if you open the boot, for example, and raise it up, you'll see inside that the rear bulkhead, which would separate the cabin from the boot, has gone. Yeah. The tank that would sit across the top there is no longer there, and the D-posts that come down have all but disappeared, basically. So the roof has been extended, keeping more or less the same roof height all the way through. And then there have been a lot of strengthening will have had to have gone on above the rear axle and below these carpets here. There's now a fuel tank that spans from about here all the way around to about there, with the battery sitting under there. And in essence, with making bespoke glass, they will have had to revise the rear window door glass and the frame to give it that higher peak, because if you compare it with that one later on, you'll see the differences there with it. The trim has obviously all been completely revised here. The treatment of the rear wheel arches where they're coming in and the trim for that. Seatbelt mounts have been altered and will obviously have to meet a regulation. Another reason why the car would take more effort to put into production if that was ever to go by the way. This over carpet here, this is listed and rolled back, covers up the trimmed wooden sections, where this one here is a bifold for the spare wheel, underneath of which is the jacking equipment, etc. The petrol tank runs from around here all the way around there to about here at this point. I'll just leave that there for the moment, and then the battery is housed in here, because this car would have been built with a battery in the boot originally, so this is where the battery goes for here. There's also, if I just fold this back, here we have a cubby for a warning triangle, for international travelling and what have you. You have the warning the triangle in there. Yeah. And then we have a first aid box, which is inside there. And whilst this is nothing to do with user fittings as such, but it's an interesting one which is showing its developmental roots, behind this particular cover here is the rear fuse box. And you can see it's so early in development that the fuse ratings are all written by hand. We have a toolbox on this side, albeit empty, because again all XJ40s came equipped with a toolkit, and that's where the toolkit would sit in this one here. Very nicely made, proper cantilever hinge, with a notice for something there which I can't quite read from here. It's quite a well put together and well thought out car in so many respects. Here I'll go to the front there and I'll show the seats as they drop down as well. So you have this lever here which you'll pull up and the seats will come down. Now these won't quite go all the way down, they are springing, and that just seems to be the nature of them. But if I drop the other side down as well, you get a feel for just how large the capacity can be. For a production purpose, they would certainly need to look at getting that seat to fold down more properly and leave a level bed. But you know, the real time and everything with this is the design. It is the consistency of the design right the way through. It's followed from the front of the car to the back to create truly quite a beautiful vehicle from any angle, which is not always that achievable with an estate car. Absolutely. It's vast in there, isn't it? A really big load space. And you also have the fact that the seats will fold forwards as well, split in a 2 and a 1, so which gives even more when it goes forwards. And I know from personal experience you can get a hell of a lot into an XJ40 estate. Yeah. There's no doubt about it at all. Well, I think it's fair to say, if we drop this tailgate down, David, that this is the factory car, of course, put together by design and engineering at Whitley for Jaguar, and it is a very refined design, a little bit more refined, I would suggest, than this one. David, explain. Right. Well, back in 1989, a very well-respected vehicle designer by the name of Chris Humberston, who dealt with Formula One and other things as well, was commissioned by Mr. John Williams, who ran a number of vehicle dealerships in South and West Yorkshire, etc. And 2 of these were built on XJ40, XJ6 platforms, to Chris Humberston's design for Mr. and Mrs. Williams. And then a third one was subsequently built and went straight over to America. And all 3 still survive. This one now runs in the UK. This was Mrs. Williams' car. Mr. Williams' blue car is in France, and the third car is in America. It does exist because it appeared at auction in January of 2023, but has been sold and then disappeared back into the ether once again. And they are two very different takes on the same basic principle. Jaguar's one is a much more homologous and much more smoothly designed car. From the back end, it certainly looks very much more complete and has quite a sleek look to it, etc. This one is far more, you might call, workmanlike in many ways.
There's a charming crudeness to the way the boot lid
you could
finishes.
argue that. I mean, it is an unusual fit in that regard. But one could dare say that this is the more practical of the two cars for load carrying. Amongst other things, this car was stretched at the rear. That gap that you see there, that's roughly 6 inches wide, is actually the width at the back of the car has been stretched. So to increase basically the tailgate loading area. If you look at the taper of the rear wing on Jaguar's car, it follows the original basic line of the vehicle. Whereas if you see here, the rear wing is straight. Because what Chris Humberston specified was to actually stretch the rear of the car. Both cars are exactly the same length. The wheelbase is exactly the same. It's simply the last, probably from here to here, the taper which would start to come in has just been brought out. And these wings have been completely remade. When the door is opened, you have these upstands here, and these are all fabricated in metal. This is not glass fibre or plastic, unlike the rear hatch, which is glass fibre. Now, the compromise of that is if you compare the roof lines, is this has much more of a rake to the roof than Jaguar's car that kept basically a consistent roof line going all the way through. So you lose a little bit of vertical load height, but what you do have is a massively wide load space. And if we open the boot to show exactly what I mean there, you compare it to the previous one, you can just see from there as I do that how much bigger it is.
Isn't it?
And again, these seats are a 2 and a 1, and these will fold completely flat. And it's trimmed very differently because this is a private commission. The leather is Autolux leather, and the carpet is Wilton carpet, and it's been trimmed differently. You can see the relationship of the filler, if you come round here, is in a slightly different position, giving a marginally larger fuel tank, I suspect, because I can get well over 100 quid's worth of petrol into this when it's empty. Whereas I haven't been able to yet in the estate. But if you stand back and you were to compare it, you'll see just how much wider and how much more cavernous this loading bay is compared to Jaguar's one. And the stuff that I've had in this car, I went up to Eurojag to buy some parts from an XJ-S and XJ-RS, and I had a complete XJ-RS front bumper, 2 front wings, a couple of wheels, windscreen wiper motors, and numerous other parts, all just piled in. It didn't even go in carefully. I will hasten, there was cardboard and plastic and Lord knows what else was on there to try and preserve it as best as possible. But this car's lived a life. That's got 8,000 miles on it, this has got 115,000 miles on it. A very different take, a very different use, because the Williamses were into their hunting, shooting and fishing, and the story was it was all tack and everything else that went in here for horses, etc. So you can see that bark's been knocked off in places with this car, but it's a working car, and I have no desire to make it into a concourse exhibit. It would take it away from what it is, frankly.
It's sort of proof of concept, isn't it, really? Whitley were trying to do that with a production car, but such as was the demand that a coach builder and a privateer did it themselves.
As well. This is a really, really good driving car. You can throw this around the twisty lanes when you want to, which is a testament again to the build quality, that what is now a long rectangle on the chassis, as opposed to having the strength of the rear bulkhead, etc.
Because the wheelbase is no different.
The wheelbase is no different. They're all the same. Even though that car and that one look longer than a standard saloon, they are exactly the same length. It will really, really handle well. There's no buffeting, no booming, no anything at all. And the heating and ventilation system, which is the original one to the car, is more than capable of keeping up with the extended cabin volume as well. It's no problem whatsoever, hot or cold. So it's quite remarkable. But there are nice little details with this, which have come around this side, which show things that change with them. You've got this chrome detail strip coming down here, and if you look at the equivalent one on the other side there, as Wayne noticed out, there's even like a vertical ovoid hole through which the aerial will actually come up through when the radio's turned on. Nice little neat details like that. And finally, really, is something that does give it some distinction, this car, is that these roof bars, which do give a bit of style to the car itself as well. And they're from a 1980s typical Mercedes station wagon at the time. You think about the shape of those. And I had to have these off to get the roof repainted, and I contemplated leaving them off, but actually it does lend something to the car. An unnecessary but nice little styling detail. It's there for the style rather than the practicality of sticking something on the roof rack. Because frankly, with this size cabin in there, who needs the roof rack?
Absolutely. Well, it's wonderful to have these two cars, David, side by side and compare and contrast differences between the two. The refined bodywork there of the factory effort out of Whitley, and of course the Humberston here with its extra width and its extra utilitarian practicalness. That's a word. Brilliant to see these cars together here at the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust and Jaguar Breakfast Meet. And of course you'll be following more of the articles on these cars in Jaguar Enthusiast magazine.